So in this video, we'll go over sort of standard student project websites and videos that you likely need to complete for a course. And we'll break this up into a few main sections. The first is about making an argument. And this may seem like an odd place to start when we're talking about websites. Usually people want to jump into thinking about, well, how do you actually make one of these things? However, it's important to think through what your main point or your argument is. So frequently, student websites and e-portfolios that I see are done sort of at the end of a semester or at the end of a program. And oftentimes the students are just sort of checking off requirements. Perhaps their instructors have said, here are all the SLOs that you need to show that you've completed. And so students just put up some materials that they think demonstrate those SLOs, and that's sort of it. However, just putting up those materials doesn't really make a good website. It doesn't really make a good presentation of what you actually learned. It's important to take a moment and think through, well, yes, I need to put up certain things. I'll have certain requirements for this assignment. But what is the common thread here? What is the actual point of putting all of this together? When somebody gets to the end of this, what are they going to know about me other than I did some work? What did I learn? How did I develop through this process? You need to think through that point. Maybe your point is, I can now manage complex projects. Maybe your point is, I'm now a well-rounded educator, or I'm an excellent researcher. Whatever that argument about yourself or your project is, you should then think through how you can organize your sections and pages structured in logical support of that. So you don't want to have somebody, when they get to your website, just sort of be wading through a bunch of materials. You need to make sure that those materials are speaking to the audience. Many people don't realize that their materials don't immediately do that. Your materials won't just speak for themselves. What you need to do is you need to contextualize any information you're putting up on the website. So if you need to put up, say you did some research and you have some data from that research and you put it up there, if you just put up a spreadsheet on your project website, it will mean nothing to anybody. What you need to do is you need to contextualize what you're putting up there. You need to provide details on the process. What's the background of this? How did this material come into existence? And then, frequently what instructors are looking for you to do are these two things: to reflect and to synthesize. They want you to look at what you've done and to start reflecting on it. Say, you know what, looking back over these things that I've done, over this project that is now sort of nearing its completion, I can see sort of these ways that I have developed across the entirety of it. Same with synthesize, to look back through a variety of materials and see through them the common threads that bind this whole experience together. As part of this process, oftentimes you are going to be free to sort of delete some things. Perhaps you did a video project, for example, and that video project required a lot of pre-production, but maybe only the storyboarding part was actually useful for you. The other pieces of that pre-production process didn't ultimately sort of yield the learning outcomes that you thought were most important. Oftentimes, you can downplay those elements and play up what was most valuable for you as you are creating this one overall argument or point through your website. So make sure that you pay attention to your instructor's requirements, but also make sure that those requirements aren't just being sort of a list of things that you check off, instead of actually creating a coherent and cohesive website. The next thing that I want to talk about is general sort of website design, most basic design choices. And I want to start by actually looking at a couple examples of e-portfolios. So first is this one here. This is done by a faculty member. Most people, when they see this, they start looking at it and they mostly wonder who this person is. There's really not much information here about Benjamin King. And it's sort of a missed opportunity at the outset to say something about yourself or to design this page in a different way that would get your audience more sort of attuned to who it is you are and what it is you are interested in. There are some good things here. We have a sort of minimal navigational structure here. We don't have a very complex navigational structure that will be confusing. We do have a picture, which is good. However, it is sort of on a brown background, which kind of clashes with the blue here. Overall, there's just not much here. And when you create a website for your project, you really have to think about the first page that people come to and how it is going to set the tone for your overall website and how it is going to welcome somebody in and explain the logic of your website. It should, on the first page, provide your viewer, your audience, with enough information that they sort of know what your deal is. They know what the points of this entire enterprise is. We can contrast Benjamin King's rather Spartan website design with Nick Del Zotto's here. A lot of people who see this respond fairly negatively to having a lot of text. Now, this may be a lot of information that Mr. Del Zotto wants online, and that's fantastic. However, just the way that it is formatted, the way that it's laid out, the fact that it is fairly standard looking, it's just sort of blue links and black text, is not very inviting and appealing to most people nowadays. Most people expect things to be a little bit trendier, to use larger images, to minimize and manage text better. You also notice that the navigational structure over to the left is a little bit more involved than Benjamin King's. Nowadays as well, it's a common design trend to streamline that structure. So when thinking about creating your website, you should think about the structure of it and the argument you are making, how you're going to anatomize this, what information you're going to put up there. But then you also have a bunch of aesthetic choices that you need to make. You should be very thoughtful about what typography, color, and images you are going to use. Even within pretty much any theme you have in any of the major website platforms, you're going to have control to some degree over these elements, and you should exert that control. In terms of typography, there's generally a large distinction between two types of type, serif and sans serif fonts. Serif fonts have what are called serifs on them. If you look at the T in Times New Roman there, you will see at the crossbar at the very top, at the very ends of that bar, are these little sort of lines, little sort of daggers at the very ends of it, these pointy bits. Those tiny pointy bits are serifs. It's what occurs at the top and bottom of the letter I, at the bottom of each part of the letter M. Those little pointy juttings off are serifs. If you look over at the other side to sans serif fonts, you'll notice that they don't have those. To look at the T in The Quick Brown Fox, the T doesn't have those little lines. Generally, sans serif fonts look more modern, minimal, and techy, and serif fonts look older, more formal, more like print. If I had a project about, say, Chaucer, a medieval English writer, I would probably use a serif font as it looks older and more formal. If I was doing a presentation about digital literacy in the classroom, I would probably use a sans serif font as that looks more modern. In terms of color, you want to establish a color palette and stick with it. You also want to make sure that you are thoughtful about what resonances your colors have. So we can divide color, kind of like fonts, into two categories: cool colors that have some blues in them, and warm colors that have some reds and yellows in them. Cool colors tend to be seen as calming, a little bit more professional, more soothing. They are colder as well. Warm colors tend to be more passionate, energetic, happy. They also both have negative associations. Cool colors can sometimes be seen as melancholy and somewhat depressing. And warm colors can be a little bit aggressive or shouty, especially if they get very saturated. So think about the associations you have and sort of what tone you want to set for your audience, and choose colors thoughtfully. You should always, always, always make sure that whatever colors you choose, your text is in very high contrast with your background. Never have low contrast text at all. Finally, you'll likely be using images throughout your ePortfolio or project website. As much as possible, you need super high quality resolution images. Generally, if you are looking online or you're looking through your own images, try to make sure that things are at least sort of HD quality, which would be 1920 pixels across or up and down, and 1080 pixels across. This will make sure that your images, as you can see here, won't look pixelated, but they will look crisp and clear. Pixelated images are sort of like having a typo on your resume. It looks like you don't quite know what you're doing. Another thing is that many student project websites, people want to put images of themselves on. Stay away from sort of stock selfie cliches when you do that. Ask a friend to go take a sort of a headshot of you, probably outside somewhere. Don't have sort of blurry and pixelated cell phone photos of yourself. So we looked at a couple ePortfolios that were making some design choices, and here's another one. This is Jessica Gilpin's, and you can see here some of the choices that she is making set the tone immediately. She is a marine biologist. We have sort of this watery background. We also have this octopus at the top. We have a fairly standard navigational structure. We have an image of her welcoming us, and we have a very brief paragraph about her. Overall, this is doing a lot of good work. It welcomes us in. We can get a little bit about her, and we have much more information to delve into. I wouldn't say it's perfect. I think there's a bit of a readability issue with the text sort of in the bottom of the welcome paragraph. It gets a little hard to read over the blue there. And the brown background for the headshot also sort of clashes with the blue as well. Finally, I want to talk about platforms and resources available for you to complete your project websites. So there are plenty of platforms that you can avail yourself of. Some of them are free. Some of them have a free tier, but then you need to pay if you want to get rid of ads. Some of them are always going to be paid. The simplest thing to do is to use Google Sites. It's built into your iSpartan Google Drive. You can just go into your Google Drive and go New Google Site. It is very simple to use. It also has very sort of simple themes that you don't have a ton of control over. You can change some minor things, but you don't have a lot of flexibility as you do in some other ones. Weebly is a website builder that has a free tier, and it has a lot of very, very trendy web templates. A lot of them that privilege very, very large images that will greet your audience. Similarly, Wix is another very famous website builder. It also has a free tier for you to use. Both Weebly and Wix are sort of drag and drop, and so is Google Sites as well. You just sort of drag elements over to your web page and drop them down, and that's sort of it. Both of them sort of do the same work, and I encourage you, if you want to use one of them, test them both out and just see which one speaks to you. WordPress.com is a place you can make free WordPress sites. WordPress is useful in that many companies, universities, and institutions have their websites in a WordPress server. So knowing how to do WordPress is actually a very marketable skill. Squarespace is a very commonly used website builder as well. It is always going to be a paid website builder, though. They don't have a free tier. However, they do have very nice templates, and they do have something, customer support, that you don't often get with the free tiers of other things. Adobe Spark is completely free, and it creates sort of really interesting one-page website experiences. They privilege photos, and they sort of have text that floats over these photos as you go up or down. If you really were going to live on a single page, Adobe Spark might be good for you. Finally, under resources, many people, when they're building websites, mostly just want to get some stock photos of things. If you did a podcast website, you might want a stock photo of a microphone. There are two places that I can recommend getting stock photos from. One is unsplash.com. They just have very nice, trendy photos of lots of different things. The other place is pixabay.com, which has both photos and videos if you would like to use them on your website. Both of those are licensed. All of the photos are licensed in a way that you can use them legally for whatever it is you want without even attributing the original creator. Now, that's a legal thing. As a student, you generally always have an academic requirement to cite all of your sources. So make sure you talk with your instructor before you don't cite where you got an image from. And it is always a good idea and always common courtesy and always just ethically being a good academic to cite all of your sources. You can also check out creativecommons.org, which has a search function on it to help you find permissively licensed media. At UNCG, there's also plenty of help for you. Another resource that you can avail yourself of is the Digital Act Studio, which is like the Writing Center, but for digital projects. You can schedule an online consultation to get feedback on whatever project you have. If you are building a website and have nothing done and just want to talk with somebody about sort of design choices or maybe what platforms you might want to use, you can schedule a consultation then, all the way through finishing touches of having your website sort of done and you want somebody to take a look at it and see how you can tweak it. We work at any point in the design process. We do online consultations or face-to-face consultations. Or we do both individual and group consultations. We also work on things that are not related to classes. So if you were creating a professional e-portfolio for yourself that was not part of a class, we could help you with that as well. In conclusion, when building your project websites, make sure that going through and meeting all of the requirements of the assignment doesn't prevent you from actually making a good, cohesive, and coherent website where you reflect upon work you've done and synthesize sort of what the important things for your development have been because of that work. Make sure that you're being intentional about design, that you're not being led by sort of just what you like, but you are making intentional design choices about your color, your images, your typography, selecting a theme in whatever platform you have intentionally, and that you're also availing yourself of resources and using the resources that are available to you to embrace more media and to create a very well-designed website.